Hello. Hi, everyone. So, welcome to the Passkeys Spotlight Week AMA. I'm Niharika and I will be your host today. I am thrilled to have you join for exploring the world of passwordless authentication, that is Passkeys. And we have a great panel of experts. So, hi, experts. It would be great if you could just give your intro in just one or two sentences to let everyone know what you do. And then we start.
Hi everyone, I'm Adam Langley. I'm the tech lead for Chrome Web Orphan.
Hi, my name is Arnar. I'm an engineer on our Google Accounts team, and I work on the standards aspects of Passkeys as well.
Hi everyone, I'm a product manager on the Android team working on Passkeys and Credential Manager.
Thank you. So we have some moderators in the chat, amazing people who would be helping you out, helping any question answered there. Thank you, Nilansh, Joseph, Chipping, and John to help out there. Please get your questions in there and we'll be happy to answer that. So just to begin now, we have got a lot of questions already. And I love one question there, and I'll just start with that. So, what makes you think passkeys are the future of authentication? I'll just go with Diego if you want to answer that.
Sure, happy to chime in. So you can think that passkeys in some ways are a better passwords. Passwords are heavily used by users. We use them on every day, but they are not always super seamless, right? Users need to remember them across different websites and apps. People need to type them in. People forget about them. They reuse them across sites and whatnot. So there are several issues that passwords have today. They are not super secure because they can be phished or they can be breach and whatnot. And passkeys help improve with all of those issues. They provide better security, properties such as phishing resistant properties. They also make the experience way more seamless. As the only thing that the user needs to do is, select the account they want to use their device unlock, such as their face or fingerprint, to confirm they want to use that passkey, and that's it. They are in. And so it's very simple, and we have seen that this is working at scale with many large partners, also including Google itself, with very good results. And the feedback we are getting from users is that they really enjoy using passkeys.
I would say I just agree with you. I have actually experienced this. I have a same password on different sites, and sometimes if someone just know about that, it's like you are gone. So passkeys are the future, that's for sure. So moving on to next. So when we say passkeys are the most secure solution, a lot of developers and users have confusion in mind. Do we mean impossible to breach or is it difficult to breach? Anna, if you want to chime in.
Sure. When we say passkeys are the most secure, we are talking about ways to sign into an account. So the like Diego touched on, really the thing that differentiates passkeys from other things, whether it's passwords, receiving codes in SMS, getting notifications on your phone, all these things that sort of are involved in sign-in. What passkeys have above them all is this phishing protection. So you get a protection from the attack where somebody tries to get you to approve a sign-in, but you are not actually signing, you are approving their sign-in. So passkeys gives a protection against this. And they're really together with physical security keys, the sort of the most secure way of signing in these terms. Passkeys have also, like Diego also touched on, this benefit that they are easy to use, which makes them sort of deployable. It's actually realistic to say we'll change how we sign in. We could throw a bunch of extra steps, and at some point it gets too difficult to sign in just because of the extra steps, and passkeys don't have that problem. But security always comes in layers. Passkeys, like I say, they secure your sign in, but it's still important to think about keeping malware off your devices and other things. So it's all a combination, of course.
Got it. I would say people just think this as a stronger form, as you just mentioned, that we had passwords, they have been using passwords, but there have been so many problems. So they should actually think it something which is very, very difficult and again stronger than what we already had, and think it that way. So thank you for answering that. Okay, I'll just move to next question for Diego again. So we have been hearing a lot about account recovery. So let's say I use I have a passkey. I just use that passkey, and now I just lose my device. So will I be logged out of my account, or how would I just recover from my account? Anything you could share on that? Any possible authentic alternate solutions, or would passkeys be able to help on that?
Yeah, and this is something we hear a lot from users and developers alike. So one great thing about passkeys is that they are synced across the user's device. And so the password manager usually takes care of doing that. And so if you create a passkey on your phone or on your laptop and then you lose it, you can recover access to that passkey if you sign into that same password manager on the new device. I do all the verification steps that password manager will require. And that way the user will have access to their passkeys and will be able to log back in. Now, that doesn't mean that from a developer's perspective, you should not have alternative recovery methods, such as in the same way that today there are account recovery flows. If users forget their password, there's usually a way of like resetting that and having kind of a way of accessing back to their account. So from the developer's perspective, it's always good to think as passkeys as the primary signing method. But then if the user potentially loses access to their password manager account, then they should have a way of resetting that passkey and creating a new one on a different one. But from a user perspective, I think it's super important to consider that this is tied to your password manager's account. And if you lose your device, you can regain access to all your passkeys on a new one.
Got it. So can we say that it's now easier than what we had with others?
Yeah, I
Like
think
other
so.
authentication?
I think for sure, from a user perspective, it's easier. You just need to make sure that you are signing with in the case of Android, right? And many users use Google Password Manager. If you are signing with the same Google account across devices, also in Chrome, then the user will have access to all their passkeys, regardless in which device they are coming from. So that is a very simple, thing to do, and passkeys will be there and without any extra step required.
Makes sense. As you just mentioned that Chrome also supports passkeys, and I think passkeys are something which is actually getting support on different platforms, different form factors. So moving on to a question for Chrome. Adam, it's for you. So Chrome desktop supports passkeys now. So how do they sync securely? Developers really want to know that. Like, I think security has been such a vast topic right now. So everyone is concerned about that. So can you just share with everyone how does that work?
Sure. So Chrome Desktop has supported passkeys through Windows Hello and Apple Passwords for a while now. I think this question, because it's saying now, is talking about Google Password Manager support, which is the password manager built into Chrome. So how does Google Password Manager sync securely? I assume this question is asking for details, and like these parts of Chrome are open source, so we're happy to provide details. The passkeys themselves are protobufs that are entities in Chrome Sync, and you're welcome to go look in Chrome Sync internals in a Chrome browser, and you can see these entities. So those are just synced by virtue of being signed into the Google account. Within the passkey entities, the secrets, like the PRF secret and the private key, are encrypted separately. In order to get the key for those, you need to provide your GPM PIN or the lock screen knowledge factor, meaning the PIN pattern or passcode from the Android phone. That's because these secrets are end-to-end encrypted. So Chrome will ask you for those when it needs it. Once you have this secret on desktop, we worry about malware stealing data off the disk. So Chrome on desktop doesn't actually hold this key. It talks to an enclave that runs in Google production. These enclaves are based on AMD SEV SMP, if you want to look it up. The source code to the enclave is in Chromium if you look for Cloud Authenticator. And so because passkeys are based on public key cryptography, we can do this, right? We don't have to have the secrets present on the desktop. And so for anti-malware reasons, we use these cloud enclaves such that the secrets are not kept on disk. And so hopefully Google Password Manager provides excellent security when syncing to desktops.
Got it. I just want to add one follow-up question on that. So if a user has created a passkey on Chrome, can that be synced to Android? It's a very basic, but I think developers really want to know that, like, how is that happening underneath?
If you create a passkey in Google Password Manager, it will sync to your Android devices, it will sync across your Chrome desktop devices, and soon it will sync to Chrome on iOS as well.
Thank you. Okay, moving to next one. Do we have questions in the chat? Please, if you are not asking, please ask. This is a time where you could ask anything around passkeys on Google Password Manager, Chrome, Android, anything around it. So please do share your questions there. I'll move to next question. So there have been a lot of like stealing of devices that happens. And if someone just steals my device and my device passphrase, they just know my device screen lock. And so now will they have access to all my passkeys? What is the best and safest way to approach when my device has been stolen and someone knows my device screen lock or biometrics, anything? So Diego, do you want to answer that?
Sure. So first of all, if some of you get your devices stolen, I highly encourage you to go ahead, lock that device using the proper kind of device, find my device or similar app. That's a very, very important step. On Android, we have recently rolled out device theft protections, such as if we detect that a device is under suspicion of having been stolen, we will activate several additional checks and prompt the user for additional verification before doing sensitive actions, even unlocking the device. And so that's just basics, right? Outside of passkeys, if your device is stolen, please make sure to report that using the right app, and Android supports Find My Device within Android. So please do that. Now, regarding to the question of passkeys, at some point, if your device is stolen and the person that stole it has knowledge of your device passphrase or the PIN code or the pattern, then at that point they will have access to basically almost everything that is on the device. And that's that could impact any credential that is available on the device. That could be a password that is saved somewhere, that could be a passkey that is saved in a password manager, that could also be other types of authentication as well. So at that point, again, I think the best alternative for users is to make sure that that device is locked and remotely wiped, and that way their passkeys won't be exposed. Now, as I mentioned, Android is rolling out several protections, and that will help as well. If a device is suspected of being stolen, there will be additional verifications required to change sensitive settings and or use passkeys eventually.
And if they actually have a new device now, as if user goes to new second device, they have to use the previous device screen lock. What would happen in that case? Like now, maybe the hacker has changed the screen lock. So are we working on any solution where the real user could actually make it work?
Yeah, so there are a couple of ways in which the user can get back access to their passkeys, and so I think that's the goal, right? That any time that a user gets a new device, they will have access to their previous to their passkeys on their account, and so there will be a couple of ways of doing that, and we have some ways today, and we are continuously adding new ways that will enhance the user experience with the goal of making it so that every user can recover access to their passkeys in a safe and secure way.
Thank you for answering that. So we have been talking about passkeys as used for authentication. So are there any additional use cases where passkeys can be used as a solution? And is Google exploring additional use cases for passkeys? Arnav, if you want to share any insights on that.
Sure. Yeah, there are three different uses for passkeys where they can add additional value. But like one that we at Google have had a lot of success with is re-authentication. So this is the case that you are already signed in, or you as a website or app developer, you have a user that is already signed in, but they're doing something on their account that is sensitive or high risk. For example, they might be going in and changing their billing information or security settings on their account. So in situations like this, even though you are already signed in, we want to prompt you again. We want to make sure it's the right person that is there. And doing so with passkeys is very nice because it's much simpler for the user than asking for their password or asking them to fetch another device. Because when we ask for a passkey in this scenario, it's really like just asking the user to unlock their device. Even if the device is already unlocked, you just do a biometric or you do the screen lock pin or pattern or something like that again. And we see this work extremely well. Another reason why reauth is important is that a big problem today in account security is cookie theft, so malware that steals cookies. So when we have signals or indications that might have happened, but we're not sure, we can always ask for a passkey reauthentication. It's easy for the real user if it is still the real user, but it detects an attacker because an attacker most likely doesn't have access to your password manager data.
So now,
go ahead.
So now, as you were mentioning, sorry, I thought done. So as you were mentioning, can we actually have a conclusion that passkey is not just a future for authentication? There are a lot of other use cases coming in where passkeys would be everywhere, as we say?
I think there's a lot of things that are adjacent to authentication or can be done as part of authentication. One example is that Adam mentioned before, end-to-end encryption. End-to-end encryption is something that's becoming more important in more and more apps. And passkeys, for example, have a feature or add-on feature called PRF that allows passkeys to be used as a secure recovery factor for end-to-end encryption, so that I'm signing into, let's say, some messaging app. Using a passkey can provide that app with key material that is never sent to their servers and can be used to sort of securely restore encryption keys from my messages. There's a few different things like that. Like I said, they're all adjacent to the authentication problem, but they definitely go beyond that.
As we were answering this question, someone in the audience, I believe Max, has mentioned that is passkeys going to be the worldwide standard of authentication? So any one of you want to share any thoughts on that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think Max,
maybe,
you have got your answer.
Yeah, maybe a useful way to think that there would be a lot of impact if we're able to replace passwords, which is kind of the de facto standard for authentication today. So if at some point in the future we can live in a world where passwords are not, again, the standard for authentication, but rather passkeys are, I think that would be a way better world to live in.
Yeah, that's definitely what we want, for passkeys to become a normal thing that you don't think about at all. It's just that's how you sign in. Just like most people don't think a lot about usernames and passwords. That's just how things work, and you sign in to do other stuff. And we want to try to get passkeys there because it's better for everyone.
True that. So while we are answering these questions for the audience, it's just that if you could actually let us know in the chat that how many of you are implementing passkeys? If not, what are the blockers? And if you are going to try out passkeys after you hear our responses today. So please chime in the chat and just let us know. Moving on to the next question we have from the devs. So developers really want to know the metrics or insights or anything where passkeys are really working well, or also where it is not working well so much, so they could decide their business use cases. And if we can share any insights on that, Adam, if you could chime in and share some views on that part.
Sure. It seems that passkeys work best when users are signed into their browser or mobile device and have biometrics set up. We see sites reporting greater speed to sign in and greater overall success rates of sign in those contexts. The cases where they're not working so great are devices without a screen lock, where the user verification is hard to do or is kind of burdensome and annoying for the user. And then context where the people are not signed into the device or the browser, and thus, do not have the syncing set up, because obviously you can't remember a passkey. Now, for worldwide domination, we eventually need to sort of address those cases. But certainly the places where we're seeing like the greatest positive impact today are biometrics signed in, and the numbers there are looking pretty good.
So where do you think the developers should be using the biometrics? And it might be a tricky question, but yes, we have heard that too. Like we have passkeys with biometrics, but we have some APIs for biometrics as well. Diego, if you can share some insights on where they could use passkeys and they could use biometrics API. What are the
Yes,
best use cases?
sure. So biometrics, like for native apps, are provided by platforms, and they work great in many circumstances. One of them is re-authentication. That's when like the user has already signed in, and many apps today do this, right? And they have greater control over the experience. They can control what's shown in the UI, what kind of options are available to the user, and whatnot. So I would say broadly, if that's working for you as a developer, I don't think there is a need to change that, but rather focus on passkeys as the solution that the user would use to sign in for the first time on that device, at which time that the biometrics by themselves wouldn't work because the device and the app doesn't know who the user is. And so for that first time sign-in, which
Got
again
it.
is usually done with a username and password today, that's a great
Okay.
opportunity to replace that with a passkey.
Okay, I think we just lost you for a second, but you're back. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering that. And moving on to the next one, we have something around the deletion. So when a user removes a credential on the server without deleting the associated passkey in the password manager, the user gets a confusing experience where they can attempt to sign in but keep failing on the server side validation. So is there a way to solve this? Anar, if you could share something on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is definitely has been a pain point for some early adopters of passkeys. So for others, the context here is that passkeys can be used in this way that they replace not only the password, but also the username. So experience is that you open an app or a website, and the website is like, I want to sign you in. And the browser, the OS shows you a list of passkeys that you have. They come from the password manager, but the password manager doesn't know which passkeys might have been revoked or deleted on the website or the app. So there is an answer. It's fairly new. It's called the Signal API. Signal API is a way for websites or apps to give information back to the password managers or wherever, like these things that store passkeys, about passkeys that have been revoked. So if you run a website or an app and you use passkeys, what you can do is that once a user has signed in, you can call this new Signal API and can say, here are all the passkeys that this user has today and are accepted on the server. This is propagated down to the password manager by the systems and browsers. And the password managers are expected to look at that list and say, hey, I have a passkey here that is not on the list. It must have been revoked. So let me not show that passkey in the future account selectors that you have. Same API can also be used if you do things like you change the username on the website or the app. How do you update that in the password manager? And that's the same Signal API used for that. So any developers interested in this can search for web authentication or WebAuthn Signal API explainer. And the first hit should be a document that explains this pretty well.
Got it. Thank you. I think this API is going to be so helpful. We have been hearing from a lot of developers for the deletion use case where they just don't find a path how to just remove these passkeys. So yeah, I think that's a great one to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to the next. So we have a question from the audience. Most apps using SMS OTP as for password or authentication. So should we switch to passkeys? I think the answer is going to be yes. But yeah, Diego, if you could actually let how are we? I think we are working with a lot of apps who and seeing a lot of momentum where they have SMS OTP as authentication and they are moving towards passkeys, and those are big apps. So yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. One is if you're using password plus SMS OTP, you should definitely consider switching to passkeys. That's a great reason to migrate to passkeys, because passkeys will provide a better user experience, and because passkeys have better security properties than passwords, you may not even require the SMS OTP. Now, if the app is only using SMS OTP, I think it depends on what is the use case. If the app needs the actual phone number and a verified phone number from the user because of unrelated reasons, such as like, hey, we need to be able to call the customer because to deliver something or whatnot, passkeys won't help with that. But if the reason that the app is using SMS OTP is just for authentication purposes, that is, they want to have an identifier, which in this case it would be the phone number, and they need to be able to verify that the person owns that account, and they're using the SMS OTP for that, then that's a great place to switch to passkeys and replace that flow, which costs money, which is prone to errors, and also to phishing, and replace that with passkeys as a better solution.
I believe, yes, people should think in a way that as passkeys is not actually, again, as you mentioned, that it's not for anyone who wants it for just calling. We have let's say they can actually ask it after they have done the authentication at different places. It could be at the delivery that when they want it, and they can do the stuff. But yes, for identity authentication, yes, for sure, they should be able to migrate. Cool. Okay. And now moving on to, we have some questions on cross-platform and cross-providers as well. So a lot of developers have been asking that they have been hearing a lot on that passkeys can be imported or exported in the future. So how is that going to be working? And is there anything they should be keeping in mind? Anything related to security, etc.? So Adam, if you could chime in and share anything on that part.
Sure. We've always wanted users to be able to move their passkeys between providers as they move around the ecosystem. But the norm with passwords has been that you can probably dump your list of passwords out as a CSV file on disk, and then maybe import it somewhere else. And then that CSV file hangs around on disk with all of your passwords in until maybe you remember to clean it up, or maybe never. That's not great. So we've wanted to support import-export, but we've been hesitant to just dive into the rather shady norms. So what is happening is FIDO, which is the body that defines standards in this area, is working on and has a reasonably mature standard now called the Credential Exchange Protocol. And this lets password managers exchange secrets directly between each other without leaving them all on disk to hang around. It also covers not just passkeys, but all the many credential types that password managers can handle these days: passwords, passkeys, but secret notes, maybe credit cards, all the sorts of things. And it's extensible, so hopefully it can work with the new types that we will add in the future. So work on this is progressing. You're starting to see early implementations appear. Google is working on one. Apple has one in betas of iOS and macOS now. So things aren't quite ready to go, but we hope that this will be reasonably fleshed out in 12 months or so.
Got it. So now if, let's say, someone is using Google Password Manager and they have some 3P provider, they should be able to do it. And shouldn't there be any security perspective also be there? Or whenever they are just exporting, importing these passkeys to other providers?
So I hope that on Android, in the coming year, Google Password Manager will be able to exchange credentials with other third-party password providers. Those third parties obviously have to implement the credential exchange protocol as well, but we're working with many of them, and we have high hopes that they will.
Cool. Thank you for answering that. So we have a lot of credential types being supported when we talk about Credential Manager. So what credential types are presently supported through Credential Manager with passkeys on Android? Diego, if you could share something on that.
Sure. So, and to provide extra context for those of you who may not be familiar with Credential Manager is the Android API that support passkeys and other authentication or credential types on Android. And so that's a way that's the API that developers use on Android to implement signing and sign-up flows. And Credential Manager not only support passkeys, but it also supports passwords and signing with Google. And the goal is to provide a seamless experience for users, combining all of the credentials that are available in a single dialog and smartly deduplicating those. So for instance, if a user has a password and a passkey for the same account of an app, then only one of those options will be shown to the user as in the primary dialog. And if the user wants, they can access a secondary menu and use the other credential. And so the goal is to provide a very streamlined and simplified experience for users. And then on the developer side, it also helps because we've been simplifying our API, our portfolio of APIs that are available for developers. And so right now, developers on Android should integrate with Credential Manager and get all the support from Android and Google regarding authentication.
So this means that Credential Manager is going to be the one-stop solution for the authentication, not just for passkeys.
That is correct. Yes, and it's passkeys. It's also passwords. It's also signing with Google, and there might be more, credential types being supported in the future as well.
Got it. Thank you. So as we were talking about the password managers, someone has asked, is it possible to create my own password manager and create a UI that to handle passkey creation and the usage? So what all steps needed to announce me as a password manager, or maybe in other terms, credential provider, I would say, not just password manager. Now we have passkeys and other stuff handled through the credential provider. So Anna, if you could share, what do we have there?
Sure. I like this question. It sounds like from a person that is a little bit like me, where like, yes, you absolutely can write your own password manager, and that's actually a fun thing to do if you're bored in the evenings. So like totally a big reason that we like passkeys at Google is because of the openness. That it's based on standards. It's a thing that works the same on different platforms, and so all of this is available. And the point of it is that users choose where to store their passkeys. And it is quite of an undertaking, but anyone can code up a passkey manager or password manager. As to the questions like how you announce yourself, if you are such a path, depends on the platform. In some browsers, it's a matter of shipping a browser extension that handles some of the APIs. But as Diego was talking about on Android, we have the Credential Manager API. So there is a more coherent system. So when apps are asking for any of these credential types, the Credential Manager goes and queries the different credential providers. So what you have to do if you're doing this is that you have to implement the Credential Provider API that is in the Credential Manager. And then you, I believe, have to sort of announce yourself as a provider through your manifest file or the Play Store. And then the user will have the option of sort of turning your app on as a credential provider. Then you can start storing passwords and passkeys and other things, and with your own implementation sync if you like. I don't know, Diego, is there anything you would like to add to that?
I think you did a great, description. Arnar, the only thing to add is that we have documentation available on developers.android.com, and we have comprehensive guides that the team has created around what are the required steps for a new, password manager to be integrated with the Credential Manager API. So feel free to check that out, and please also let us know if you have any feedback about it.
Thank you, Anna and Diego. So just to add a follow up here, is there any restriction on the Android version also to be your own provider, credential provider?
Yeah, so Android supports providers integrated with Credential Manager starting from Android 14. That's the Android version where we announced Credential Manager. And so Android 14 Plus, the user can choose to use the provider manager of their choice, and they can go into settings and change that. Before that, and for backwards compatibility reasons, we are only able to support Google Password Manager. And so on earlier versions of Android, such as Android 9 to Android 13, users are only able to use Google Password Manager. But more and more devices are moving to, Android 14 Plus, and so, it's a big market.
Yeah.
Got
And
it.
maybe it's worth calling out that on Android 14 app, like users can have multiple provider installed and enabled. You don't have to.
Oh yeah,
You don't have to pick one basket to put all the eggs in.
yeah, and that's where the import export could also happen easily. Cool. Yeah. Okay, and we are not getting enough questions from the chat. So, do we assume that you guys already know a lot about passkeys? If not, please chime in and share your questions. This is your time where you could just ask anything on passkeys. So, please do ask that. Moving on to the next question now. So, developers now want to know that does Chrome's WebAuthn API on Android supports large blobs? I've heard about this a lot, this data type. So, Adam, if you could share if we are working towards it or what is it now? What is the state?
So developers asking about the large blob extension generally want to store a secret key in there for encryption purposes. The answer to that, the better answer, is the PRF extension, which will give you secret keys on demand. The reason that people have focused on large blobs in the past has been that Apple Passwords didn't support the PRF extension, but did support large blobs. However, as of iOS 18 and macOS 15, Apple Passwords now supports the PRF extension. That should work in Safari, it should work in apps, it works in Chrome Canary right now, and so obviously will work in Chrome in general soon. So that is probably the best answer to the question. Narrowly speaking, I suspect the large blob extension will be passed through to the password manager on Android, but I'm not aware of any password managers on Android that implement large blob, and Google Password Manager does not.
Got it. Okay. Cool. And as we are talking a lot about the providers, we are talking about a lot of form factors. I think we have a lot of things coming in the next year. So developers want to know again, like we lost a lot of users on Wear OS authentication time. When will passkeys be coming to Wear OS? And not just Wear OS, we have other form factors like TV, Auto, Diego. I think we have a lot of things coming in the future. So if you could share something on that.
Yeah, that's right. So really excited about this question. So the answer is pretty soon. Passkeys are coming to Wear OS in the next quarterly release. And so they will be available via Google Password Manager and third-party providers as well. So apps that are, in Wear OS, they should be thinking about supporting these as well as part of their apps. And for other form factors like TV and Auto, it's something that we're already working on. We do want to make sure that passkeys are available everywhere the user is, because that's actually a key, critical success factor in order for us to unlock that vision of, having passkeys be the worldwide standard of authentication. And so please stay tuned for updates on that note.
I think anyone who has ever typed the password using their TV remote can relate to this.
Absolutely. Yeah. We need to fix that. So we're working on it.
I think the users have a hard time just to scan the QR codes when they are using TVs and all. So I believe it's going to be a very useful feature for everyone like us. So yeah, I think it's going to be exciting next year. Yeah. Okay. Now we have a question again on the biometrics, which is again related to the passkeys technology, like how the things are working. So is it possible to disable the pin or pattern as an option to create or like validate the passkeys and just use the biometrics, because we have got a lot of biometric screen locks, and there are a few apps which just think that the screen lock or pins are not that secure, I would say. And biometrics might be, because it's like the fingerprint of the user, and screen lock someone could easily guess. So what's your thoughts on it, Adam? If you could start, and I would like Diego and Anand if you want to chime in too.
So the method of user verification is up to the password manager. And some password managers just fundamentally need the user to type in a knowledge factor because they're using it to perform end-to-end encryption, well, end-to-end decryption on the fly. And so they can't require biometrics in that case. And frequently, knowledge of a PIN on the mobile device is enough to enroll new biometrics. And so limiting things to biometrics sort of isn't that effective. But there are cases, where the PIN is not so suitable. And like Diego, do you want to talk about Android theft detection?
Sure, absolutely. So I think I mentioned this earlier in the AMA session, but Android is introducing theft detection and protections. And so in some cases, that will mean that when a potential theft is detected, then the device will limit the option of using non-biometrics screen lock factors, such as a PIN, a passcode, or a pattern, to perform some sensitive actions. And so in this case, for instance, if a user wants to use a passkey, they will kind of be only offered to use a biometric if some of these protections have been enabled. So I think that definitely helps, in those cases where there is a suspected, where the user who is in front of the device is suspected not to be the owner of the device. And that's why Android is investing in all of those solutions.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. I think we have talked a lot about theft, and now I think I love this question. What we have got now is someone really wants to understand about the passkey, the user's device lifecycle when they are interacting, like passkeys are interacting. So how do passkeys interact with the user's device lifecycle? For example, what happens to a user? I'll just ask, like, there are 3 questions. I'll just ask the one first. What happens to the passkey if a user just resets their device? The second is upgrade their operating system and switches to a new device. So starting with when they are just resetting their device. So Diego, if you want to share something on that.
Sure, I can chime in. So if the user resets their device, they will be able to access their passkeys when they set up their device again, and they need to log in back to the same account they were using with the password manager. So for instance, on Android, most users or many users use Google Password Manager. And so if when setting up their device, they log back into the same Google account, they will have access to their passkeys. Now, the second question was around the device upgrading their operating system. In that case, the transition should be, very seamless. There shouldn't be any extra step required for users to continue using passkeys, because passkeys, the user will continue to be signed in to their apps in most cases, including the password manager, and so passkeys will already be there. And then if they switch to a new device, I think the most important bit for users to remember is that they need to make sure that they are signing in to the same account they are using on the password manager on the new device. And again, if they are doing this on Android and they do a backup and restore flow, then that will happen automatically, and the users will be signed in on the same Google accounts on the new device as well if they are using Google Password Manager. But if they are on a different platform, then they should remember and keep track of that.
Wow, that's like, I think I'm getting to know a lot about it now. So I'm sure like this is really helpful for anyone who is listening right now. So thank you for sharing the insights. We have got some questions now from the chat itself, and I'm just dropping that now. So, question for you, Adam. Chrome recently added support for syncing passkeys via Google Credential Manager on desktop. Some users found the UI confusing. Are there any plans to simplify it or improve user guidance? So, the audience want to know that if we are working on improving the UX there?
Yeah, I think the main feedback we've received is that asking users for their end-to-end secret, the Android lock screen knowledge factor or the GPM pin, in line with the passkey flow was actually confusing. So I think what we're going to aim to do there over time is move that step to the point when you are signing into the browser. We think users might be more in that mind, and that we are surprising them by putting it in the passkey flow, even though arguably it was in context. So that's sort of the overwhelming majority of the feedback we've gotten. There are like some smaller pieces of feedback we've received around things like the autofill UI, where some sites have told us that it's very important that when passkeys are involved in the autofill UI, the generic username filling continues to work, because they have many users not using passkeys. And so we are going to do that. We've done the work to make that not interfere. And so those are the things that are on our mind at the moment.
I would maybe add to that also, like as a general thing, passkeys are a new thing, and because it's an ecosystem thing that is based on standards, there are many platforms and players involved. Like if people have used passkeys in the past, you may run into confusion because they don't all work the same. Some of them sync, some of them don't sync. There's different types of passkeys to choose from. As things are becoming more ubiquitous in passkey support, all this confusion will sort of go away, I think, over time. And most people will have a passkey implementation that just works. There's not a lot of choices or extra steps involved in it, and that's what we are aiming for.
I agree, and I hope who asked the question has got some insights on that. We really appreciate your feedback, like sharing these kind of feedback with us. Please keep sharing so that we can improve on what we are building. So thank you for sharing that. Moving on to next, on a form factor. So how would you recommend as a best practice to invoke the password manager to authenticate a user when interacting with Android Auto, to authenticate a user to your media app? And someone from audience has asked us, like, it's a feature that they are looking into. So Diego, as we are doing some work on Android Auto right now, so do you have anything which we can share right now, or anything on high level?
Yeah, so I think couple of thoughts, and for sure, first of all, please make sure to take a look at the documentation. It's available on developers.android.com around authentication, guidelines for Android Auto. So that's definitely the first suggestion. The second one is that we will be bringing Credential Manager and passkeys to Android Auto pretty soon. And so at that point, definitely what we recommend is that the developer will rely on the Credential Manager API and requests all the credential types that are supported by the app on that call. So meaning if the app supports both passwords, passkeys, and signing with Google, they can make a single API call, request that. And from a user perspective, the user will be offered the available credentials of those types that are available in the Auto device, and they will be able to choose which one to use and sign in a very simple and seamless way. So that is definitely what we are aiming at, and so please stay tuned for updates during the year on the exact dates for that.
Yeah, and I just love, like, when we say seamless, it's actually seamless because yeah, you have a lot of devices, you have a lot of form factors, you have different platforms, and I think, as we say, passkeys are now going to be everywhere, and it is just going to be as easy as the authentication could be. So yeah, I think people are just going to love how the authentication world is moving towards, be it safer, seamless, and secure way of doing authentication, and more than that too. So we have 10 minutes more here, and if you have questions, again, please do share in the chat. And as you can see, like, we have the amazing experts who are answering all those questions really well. And I'll just ask another question. So if you have more questions, please do ask again. So we have talked a lot already, like what we are working in 2025 and in the future. So if you all three could just share insights on the future roadmap for passkeys. So, starting with you, Adam, anything you'd want to share on the Chrome side?
Sure. So now that we are syncing Google Password Manager passkeys to desktop, um, we have had this system where Chrome on desktop will know about your Android phones and it will display the list and you can click one of them to use a passkey from your phone. It's quite complicated. And a lot of the feedback we've gotten is that users don't understand it. They don't understand where the list of phones is coming from. Certainly, if you have two phones that are of the same model, it gets pretty confusing. So I think we are going to remove that and just rely on the QR scanning flow, which is what users of iPhones have been using all along. Another thing coming up is what is called in the spec conditional create, which is called more broadly passkey upgrade, which is the ability to create a passkey without needing the user to interact with the device. So if the user already has a password with the same username on the site, we think it is reasonable just to turn that password into a passkey without having to bother them, without them having to do biometrics and so forth. And so look for that in Chrome and Androids coming next year. We are also considering other UI patterns on the web. So on mobile, you can ask the system to display a list of passkeys and other credentials if one exists for the user. That is not currently possible on the web. The closest you can get is the autofill support. But certainly many sites have told us that they like this pattern on mobile and they would like to see it on the web. There are other considerations on the web, there are other privacy considerations that make it not sort of an immediate thing that we can just do without thought, but we are definitely thinking about how we can provide those facilities.
Got it. A question on conditional create. So, for passwords to passkeys upgrade, is it just right now supporting passwords or other credentials as well? What are we going to do in the 2025?
So in 2025, what we're aiming for is if the user has a password for that user and site in the password manager already, that the site can just turn that into a passkey. And there'll be a notice to the user, but it won't be blocking. The user won't have to sort of do stuff. It will let them get the benefits of passkeys without the sort of the burden, small as it may be, of actively having to invoke one.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Diego, if you want to share anything on Android.
Sure. So similarly, as Adam was mentioning, we're working on supporting that seamless password to passkey upgrade experience. So that will be coming, and users will be able to enjoy the benefits of passkeys at more scale. The other thing we're working on is supporting the Signal API that Arnar was mentioning previously. And so to make sure that if a user goes to the management surface of an app and they delete or modify the information of their account, or they delete the passkey from there, that can be reflected as well in the password manager. So supporting that will be important, and it's pretty critical given the scale of passkeys deployments already. The other thing we're working on is on supporting Import Expert. So as Adam mentioned, we are expecting to have this available at some point during 2025 on the Android ecosystem. And we have a feature that is called Restore Credentials, which allows apps to restore the account signing state when a user upgrades or purchases a new device and they're restored from their old device. That is based on WebAuthn credentials. So basically, a developer that already support passkeys can easily integrate with this feature and make sure that all their users, when they upgrade to a new phone, they will be still in touch and engage with that app. So that is coming as well during 2025.
So as you just mentioned, restore credentials. So does that mean that users don't really need to do anything like user interaction and they would just be logged in automatically?
Right. So it's similar to how apps today are restored on a new device, where the user chooses which apps they want to restore, and then those apps are installed automatically on the new device without the user needing to go to like the Play Store and downloading them one by one. This is kind of similar, right? The apps will be installed and the session data will be available, via this restore key, so that apps can automatically sign them back in. And from a user perspective, it looks like they are in the same state as they were in the previous device. So I think it's a pretty nice feature for developers, and I would definitely encourage
sure.
all of the developers to check it out.
I'm sure they are just going to love it. Yeah. Thank you. Anna, do you want to share anything on identity, Google Password Manager?
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously, a lot of these new features are sort of coming on the platforms. I think more from the perspective of a relying party or a website, apps that are using these. I think we're going to see more and more apps and websites use passkeys in this autofill type of way. So instead of you typing a username and then because you have a passkey, you are asked for the passkey instead of the password, the passkey is just there in the autofill options for your username. And like basically all you have to do is to select it and unlock your device and sign in. So I think that's not a new feature from the platform perspective, but that's something that we've seen a lot of websites and apps start using. This solves a lot of issues that developers might have run into. For example, there's also a little bit of gamble calling the passkey APIs, because if the user doesn't have a local passkey, they might have to go into a cross-device flow, which you don't want them to. So as a developer, these autofill type experiences, I think, is something we will see more and more of. But otherwise, to say the big theme from us on the Google account side is like simplification. We really want passkeys to be, like we said earlier, the default. And we're working on several of these things with reducing the steps and the options that users have to deal with. Like Adam said earlier, not make you type in the lock screen of an older Android device when you are using the passkey. So do that when you're setting up the new device. And ideally, the way that you sign into your Google account will unlock the Google Password Manager without any additional steps. So we're working on a number of things to try and enable that in 2025.
I think this is going to be really useful. And I'm sure, I think I'm being a user, if I just see that these are just really cool and exciting updates, I'm sure everyone is just going to love that. So what I see from here is that's it for all the questions we have for today's live stream. And so that's a wrap for the Passkey Spotlight Week AMA. Thanks to everyone who have just joined us here and get their questions answered. We hope that we answered all the questions what you had in mind, and we just answered them really well. So thanks to our amazing experts, Adam, Anna, Diego, for joining today and helping everyone understand passkeys better. Thanks to our chat moderators too, who has just helped refine all the questions, answer, and share the questions with us. And I'm sure this is not just helpful for others who are just implementing, but I think you are going to try out passkeys today for sure after hearing all the cool and exciting updates. And passkeys are going to be everywhere next year or more. You'll just see passkeys and passkeys. So please try it out. Share your feedback. Share where you are stuck. We are happy to help. Share all our just check out all the resources we have, and we would be happy if you could just share if something is there which is blocking you to implement and where we could help you out. There is some feedback form over the DAC where we get a lot of questions, and we just love to refine our resources based on that. On behalf of myself and the Android team and Chrome team, Identity team, actually the Google team here, this is Niharika and signing off. See you on next one. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.